All right. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, everyone. I'm very excited and very humbled and honored to have the opportunity to interview the one and only Ford from PHI Tribe. Now, before we introduce Ford, I just want to say that for those that are not familiar, PHI Tribe is an absolutely, in my opinion, beautiful and fantastic channel that deals specifically with harmonious tones that I think is extremely vital, whether one is looking to relax or to put themselves in a certain state of meditation, a certain thought, a certain thought-oriented state, but even perhaps, I know this is something we've touched upon off the record privately, Ford, for those interested in doing experiments pertaining to harmonics and acoustics, etc. I think that what Ford and team does on PHI Tribe on their YouTube channel specifically is absolutely fantastic and dare I say humbly much more vital than many people may think. So without further ado, Ford, how are you doing today? And again, I just want to thank you so much for coming on the show.
No, thank you very much for having me. I've been a huge fan of your show forever. It's so funny to see you and be talking with you like this. I've loved your stuff. And it's funny because a lot of what we talk about is so synergistic. It's all about toroidal mechanics, and that's pretty much what you're all about.
I
A lot of
couldn't
that.
agree
Yeah.
more. Exactly. So one thing I'll say, and I say this in a congratulatory sense, is that your channel has done substantially well with respects to whether it's views or just, people complimenting in the comments, et cetera, et cetera. And I can certainly see why. So my first question is, what motivated you to start PHI Tribe to begin with? What were the, whether direct or indirect, underlying motivations there?
PHI Tribe, this is our fourth time trying this, and I've been in music business for 30 years. I've worked for every record company you could think of, every major famous person. I've produced them music for them, but they were not interested. I saw that there was this gaping hole in music that it could be used for so much of a better purpose, and I had this idea about making a record label where the lyrics were positive and things would be uplifting and that kind of a thing, like having this niche thing. And for years I couldn't get any of the guys in the labels to go for it. They all thought it was just a dumb idea. And then in 2005 I had a spiritual awakening, and then it became beyond beyond anything of importance to me. I had to do this, and I teamed up with a few people who we worked with together, and we tried this several times to make it work. And a very, very good friend of mine, Mike, Mix Mike, he's usually here doing these shows with me. He's on vacation right now, but we have been both into toroidal mechanics, and we're both very much into the ether, all the different the spooky sides of science. That stuff that we're really, really into. We're both big time psychonauts, and Mike is very left brain and I'm very right brain. So when we started to talk about these things, we started seeing this really interesting correlation between philosophy and mathematics. And then the more we talked about it, the more we started to see that music was literally the thread that sews these two things together. And I mean that literally, and that's all through the toroidal mechanics. When you understand the Fibonacci, you understand how the movement of the waves goes through the toroid. It does that in a very musical nature. And when you can get into that groove, you can really, really steer somebody to feel a certain way, make their consciousness kind of open up in different ways. And it's not just on or off. There's a variety. It's like a switch with like 50 different possibilities, and you can really, really steer somebody into that state of mind very, very easily using these techniques.
Well, that's absolutely fantastic. And as we see here, as I'm sharing my screen for the audience, when they, for those that will be watching later on, we see, for example, you have different, I guess you could say, harmonics and different videos tuned for different scenarios of an individual. So we have, for example, we see here PTSD relief in the 432 hertz spectrum, as opposed to, say, for example, anxiety relief in this particular case. And then we have the play world, which is more of a relaxing sort of vibratory rate at the 528 hertz spectrum. So if you don't mind me asking, when deciding to upload certain videos with respects to the motivation behind them, and of course the frequency that drives the force that's going to dictate what the video entails, what do you do you go through sort of a testing process of, say, for example, you say, okay, I want to do a 528 hertz video. Do you go through some type of vetting process of different tones at different oscillations or resonances before uploading them, or what's the process there, if I may ask?
The process is just identifying something that we want to work on, and this isn't just YouTubers coming up with this thing. This is like, this stuff has been tested in thousands and thousands of medical journals. This has been tested over and over and over again,
Right.
but nobody does anything about it because it's too ingrained. It all has to do with tuning, and you'd have to radically change the music industry to make this stuff work. The technology we're using, we call PHI balance. It's proprietary. It's something we created, but it is based on a lot of the same mechanics of what we hear about 432 hertz and 528 hertz, which are just specifically 432, which is a mathematical constant. So there's a lot of significance with that number. And then we get into the solfeggio tones, which are also geometric. All these the frequencies are based on the angles or angels, right? The Benedictine monks were the ones who created the solfeggio tones, or discovered them rather. So we kind of do a lot of research about what specifically thing we want to target, and then we go into it and make the track for that specific thing. So you can relieve
That's incredible.
anxiety, you can release toxins from the body, and people they're like, oh, ha ha ha, that's not good. And then they write a paragraph in a comment section, they cannot believe this thing happened to them the next day or whatever. It's the state of balance is so underrated. When you're in balance, people know what that's like, the flow state. If anybody's ever been in that creative zone, people call it the zone. Like, oh, I'm so in the moment. Everything's just coming to me. You're just Zen people talk about it, living through life like you're 4 feet off the ground. You're just kind of floating through life and everything's just coming to you. That's the flow state. That's the state you want to bring your consciousness to. And you can do that through the frequencies that we're giving you. And it does it through sympathetic resonance. You've ever seen someone break a wine glass by hitting the note? Their tone matches the frequency of the glass breaks, right? Or if you pull up to a traffic light, someone's bumping some bass music, and all of a sudden the mirror in your car is shaking, right? That's sympathetic resonance. So it's the same scientific principle that we're using these frequencies to become sympathetic to your body and mind. And what that does, I don't think anybody's really clear about the real possibilities of where that can lead. But
I couldn't agree more. And if we may break that down a little bit. In your opinion, Ford, what are one of the issues that perhaps in your view and or has been substantiated in either data-based or consensus based or even peer review based studies? What is the, dare I say, issue, for lack of a better word, with the music industry and the broadcasting industry as we now know it to be the case, in terms of frequency resonances and the again, what many have called to be the butchering of certain harmonics deliberately?
Yeah, it's I think the problem is nobody knows about it, and then the people who do know about it don't understand how significant it is. And to speak to the conspiracies, you could say this is all done by design. There's plenty of stories that go along with what that was, but they say that everything was 432 before the Nazis got involved and took over Austria and changed it in 1953, I believe. And there's some truth to that. There's a lot of truth to that. But there was also truth that there were all kinds of tunings before then. So it's hard to say that the Nazis did this thing. But the bottom line is, yes, the tuning of the music that we listen to, 100% of the tuning of the music that we listen to is mathematically off. It's
Out of sync, if you will.
Out of sync. Yeah. It's I'm looking for the word, but
Oh, no worries.
Yeah, it's okay. But yeah, it's literally off. It's almost opposite of what it needs to be.
Right. And I think
because it's an even number, right? It's an even number. So you see the wave going up and down. It's literally pulling you in the opposite direction.
And so just to clarify, you're saying currently it's an even number with respects to the standard Hertzian spectrum today.
Correct. Yes.
Right.
Yes. Everybody uses a tuning of 440 today. I would say that's 99% of all music out there. And all of the instruments that we use are specifically made to resonate with that frequency very well. So this has been in the music world forever. This is a standard. It literally is a global standard, but that standard is not really good for you. I
And
really good for you. And then there's
this
also stories of Montauk and things like that, on this stuff. So it's
right,
interesting.
right.
It's deep. It's
Very
deep. I
much
don't know how
so.
deep
I,
to
I was
go.
going to ask if perhaps if you wanted to expand on Montauk, if that would be okay with you. But before we did that, I wanted to ask if dare I say, for people that are not as I guess you could say musically inclined, such as for example myself, I have a lot of people in my audience, both public and private on the member side, that are very much inclined. And for those that are listening or watching to this now, you certainly know who you folks are. And the question I'd like to ask here is, forgive me if this is a bit of a novice or rookie question, but is there an underlying sort of standard that is set even in the studio, in recording studios, with respects to the spectrum on which certain, say, records are vocalized over, et cetera, et cetera? And if so, this standard, I take it, is just simply not questioned by studio producers, or am I off completely?
You're 100% correct. Yes, it's a standard that everybody follows, and nobody questions it. Nobody even thinks about it. That's just the standard. I mean, that's just what you're taught. We all tune to 440. We all tune to A is equals to 440 hertz. That's how every instrument can play with one another. We all say, okay, we're going to play G together, and we play G, right? That tuning is what's required to do that. But what they're doing is we're with the number that we're setting that initial tuning to is off from what you need to be in line with the toroidal mechanics.
Right, got you. And
The
so
whole
it
trick is to get right through that dipole, right? That's the whole point, right? To pull you right into the nowness, right? And
right.
the other frequencies are literally pulling you out of it.
So, if I may say, if we were to liken this, for example, to a liquid or a fluid or a viscous example, if we were to have, say, a stream of a, let's just say, water, and water would represent, say, when you're going to say pluck a chord on a guitar or a bass or etc., the frequency in which that resonance then rides on is
Yeah.
what the standard is what you're saying.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yes. And
Right.
everything is harmonic to that. Everything is harmonic to that frequency. You see what I mean?
Got you.
But that frequency is off from nature. It's literally off.
Right, and it speaks to this. Like, do you find that frequencies that are more uneven numbers tend to be more appropriately resonating with individuals in a positive sense than even numbers?
No, I wouldn't say it's so much of an even odd thing. It's more of just following Tesla's 369 principle, Maxwell's principle of the function of a wave, which is the 369. The three beginning is the trough. I mean, is the peak, and then that represents the newness of something, and then it dips down into the trough, which is a 6, represented by the 6, because that's the opposite of what you're trying to find out. And then it comes back up to the top of the trough again. I'm up to the crest again, and that's represented by 9, which is completion. It's the new gnosis that comes from the question, learning about its opposite, and then the completion is 9. So Tesla
Mhm.
thought there was very significant things with the 3, 6, and 9, and I agree. When we start finding these frequencies, we're pretty much just isolating the ones that are fall in line with that.
I
And
would actually strongly agree as well. For me, more of
yeah,
a physics thing, but I think it's one and the same when we get into harmonics and et cetera, because
it literally is the same. It's
yeah,
physics. Yeah.
right, exactly. Very well put. Well, with that said, I'd love to know, Ford, your
Yeah.
perspective on the potential influences of the Montauk project and how that may have factored into your understanding of current harmonics and the standards of such and all that as we know it today.
I wouldn't even be the person to ask about that. I've heard rumors. I know somebody who was there. I can't mention names.
By
And
chance, not to put you on the spot, would you be able to elaborate on the individual, not with respects to details or identity at all, but with respects to anything they may have told you about what it was like when they were
there was a lot to do with binaural beats and 432, and that was pretty much all I got.
right?
That's something that you just don't talk about if
No,
you
of
were
course,
involved in
it's a
it.
very it's very unfortunately it's
Yeah.
and I'm watching my words here as well. It's a very unfortunate, ominous and dangerous thing to subject an alleged project that took place. So right,
Yeah.
so absolutely, yeah. The other thing I wanted to ask was that, do you find that when inducing certain hertz with certain videos, etc., of course, we have to factor in the variables of the, the YouTube algorithm, the time of day the videos are posted, etc., etc. But do you ever find from an intuitive energetic standpoint that certain videos or frequencies put in specific videos tend to resonate more with your audience compared to others, in the sense that, for example, uh, we see you have some videos where you've gotten well over a million views, for example, right? And your other ones have gotten lots of views as well. But do you find, for example, certain videos in combination perhaps with the algorithm assisting you guys, but of course the work you put in is substantial as well. Do you find that there's dare I say an immaterial unspoken resonance that a lot of people in your audience tend to favor more than others in some cases?
Yeah, unquestionably the chakra third eye tuning. That one has over almost 9 million views now.
Wow.
Yeah, in 1 year, it's only not even a year old actually.
Right.
Um, so yeah, that one is very, very popular. But the reason it's popular is because it induces lucid dreams. So significant about that particular one is the frequency of the pineal, which is what the third eye is all about, is very, very close to 432 hertz. So if you double that, that would be the frequency of the pineal gland. So you've got 432 working directly with it. And then also the binaural beats that I'm using in that are designed to keep you in the hypnagogic state for as long as possible. So people familiar with the hypnagogic state, it's that place that you get to right before you fall asleep and you're just about to doze off, and you might have a dream that's kind of coming into reality and out of reality. And if a lot of people have had that experience before, and that's a lucid dream. Some people can get very, very good at getting into that
Sorry,
state. And if you get,
could we describe this
sure.
perhaps as the in-between transition stage, if you will?
Yeah, yeah. As you're falling asleep, there's a state that you get to called the hypnagogic state, which is just a frequent state of mind that is between the REM and wakefulness. So it's right in between there. And what's happening is you're oscillating between the two before you finally get on track, and then you dip into an REM sleep. So there's a lucidity that happens there. There's a point where you're kind of in a dream and kind of lucid of the fact that you're in a dream. But that usually only lasts for just a brief moment. Now, you can use these frequencies to hold somebody in the hypnagogic state. And when you can stay there, you can have what's called lucid dreaming. You can literally be aware that you're dreaming while you're dreaming. And it takes practice, but the frequency will definitely bring you there all throughout the night. And you'll kind of feel like, God, I didn't get any sleep. I was awake the whole night. But literally, you were in the REM state for the whole night. So you got plenty of rest. But what you're doing is you can practice and get to a point where, for most people, like just the realization that you're dreaming is enough to end the dream. But as you practice and you start to get familiar doing it, you can hold on to the experience longer and longer. And the longer you can hold on to it, you can fly like Superman, make flowers grow on the wall. You can do anything you want to bend your reality. Sound familiar?
Right.
So I'm
Right.
so it's kind of like I'm kind of suggesting, and where I'm coming from is might sound really, really out there, but I come from a non-dual perspective. I kind of come from a place where, how do you know when you set foot off the bed this morning, you woke up, that you're not just stepping into another dream, that it's just a dream within a dream within a dream within a dream forever, always reflecting who you've become.
A fractalized state
A
of self.
fractalized state of the self. Yeah.
Right, of self-reflection, no pun intended on the reflection part, but yes, yeah,
Exactly. And
right.
it is pun intended because that's fractal, right?
Right. No, I couldn't actually, very well put. I couldn't agree more. One thing as well I wanted to ask was that I'm looking here just through your channel, and we see, for example, we have a what's called 3 DNA 432 hertz, and then we compare that or contrast that with, for example, a shamanic drumming ceremony of a psychedelic 5D journey at 432 hertz. Do you find that sticking with the 432 hertz more than other Hertzian frequencies tends to have the most beneficial effect, regardless of the intent of that particular video?
Not that I have found yet. I find all of the frequencies that we do, and we do probably about maybe 20 altogether, are very significant. There's a lot that I've tried that are just kind of, bull. I don't, mess with them. But
Right.
you can tell because what happens is your bones start to vibrate. Like it's very akin to being like at a concert and standing next to the speakers, like getting up real close, and you kind of feel like your whole body shaking. It's very much like that. When the resonance happens, it's undeniable. You just feel it inside of you.
Right. I actually, it's very well put, because that's something that was going to take me to my next question, which was this idea of feeling a tone or a rhythm or a sound more than actually trying to uh, logically understand it in the studio when editing, but perhaps a combination of that merging into a center point. So you have a combination of both using logic when editing and also intuition speaks to that non-duality angle.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Sorry, I lost my train of thought there just then. I was going to say something and I
Oh, no
forgot, but
problem, no problem. Because
no,
I
it's okay.
there's quite a few things I wanted to say as well too. I mean, I will tell everybody
Oh,
that. Sorry,
I just remembered. So
please,
what I was
please.
where you were pointing out there with the 3 DNA, what we have between the different frequencies and different playlists. So we have music. We're trying to have a place where we have music for every situation.
Right.
There's music to work out to. There's music to sleep to. There's music to study to. There's music to meditate to. There's music to have sex to. Whatever you want. You know, we're trying to create the music for every environment, because music is what kind of sews your whole reality together. You know, so you can bring this flow state into every moment and have higher performance, have higher everything. So that's why there's so many different variety of styles of music. And as far as the frequencies go, like I said before, we're just sticking with the ones that are just seem to be the most effective. And what's interesting is the frequencies, specifically the solfeggio frequencies, are all based on geometry. So I'm a big believer that the Benedictine monks and music in the beginning music was used as a healing modality, and the churches were hospitals. That's just where you went to heal, and they used the fractality of the angles in the church to matched and mirrored with the angles or of the music, of the geometry that's creating the music. So the frequency and the angles are sympathetic with one another. So it kind of creates this fractal
Where
amplitude
so if I may
amplifier
say,
to
the angles are
go.
harmonically sort of locking in with other angles.
Yeah, it's kind of like they're
Right.
harmonic, and they build on top of each other to be more intense, you know.
Right. Right.
So,
Exactly.
that's just my own thought, but I just think that there's something very, very significant
Oh,
that we've lost that information, or, whatever's happened.
I
But
couldn't
it's been
agree. I
obfuscated, yeah.
absolutely completely agree. I couldn't agree more. As a matter of fact, one of the things I wanted to ask is that what is the this may be a little bit of a long question, but what is the ratio if you were to put, say, a rough percentage or even just a general ratio in terms of effective versus non-effective frequencies when you're in the studio? And I ask this because I wonder if, because for me, as you know, I'm a physics person nowadays. So for me, when I'm in a facility or I'm experimenting or whatever, there's quite a lot of times where, contrary to what a lot of people may think, where I'm spending many hours just making adjustments of a device before it actually gets to work, for example. So for example, when you guys are in the studio or you're working on a new video or a new tone, a new sound, etc., regardless of what you're trying to dive into, do you find, for example, a trial and error type situation?
It's less trial and error, and more of um limitation on what I can do and what I can't do.
Hmm.
So music is made from rules. That's what music theory is all about. Otherwise, it's just sound chaos, right? So we have
Right.
these rules. We say it's going to be this tempo, this key, this whatever, right? And we set these parameters, and as long as we stay in those parameters, we're all playing together. And so what this is just a tighter sense set of rules. It's just I can only play these notes instead of this whole scale. I can only play this type of sound with this frequency. So there's a lot of like limitations in that way, which really kind of it's pretty hard to be creative when you're limited so much, 'cause you really have to think out of the box of how I can make this interesting, and
Right.
it gets
Yeah.
so yeah, it's really more about that is and really too with the sleep music is you have to there's so if you took away the music, it just goes woo, 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 woo. It just has all these crazy sounds, right? It just sounds like insane. You could never sleep to that. So the music is designed to kind of like go over that in a harmonic way that you don't really hear that so much. You just kind of hear the music. And that's really the point of it. It's just to kind of keep that in
Right.
there.
Right, right. Now, with respects to what you said about how there's more, you could say, confined options to choose from when you're trying to align, you're creating a video, and again, you're clearly very aware of, and dare I say, a subject matter expert on discerning what tones are appropriate on what frequencies, etc. Now, within that small band compared to the rest, that I guess is not ideal to use, is it possible to combine some of the frequencies within that small band, which then create perhaps which then birth a new type of resonant frequency from the two being mixed together?
On some things, on the chakra frequencies, there's some possibility of that. Even so, limited. With the solfeggio, absolutely not. The frequencies themselves are not harmonic with one another. So a lot of times you'll see these programs out there on YouTube. They'll say all 9 solfeggio frequencies, and then that's how you know it's bogus, because it would sound like trash if all 9 solfeggio frequencies were in there at the same time.
Ah, I
Yeah,
see.
they're not musical together. They just have their own. They are their own standard onto themselves, if that makes sense.
Got you. No, I absolutely yes, because
Yeah.
this to me this reminds me of certain elements within physics where you can combine anything you want ultimately, but certain things are far more fluid and have a very, dare I say, magical result in certain cases compared to other situations. Now, what's interesting is that a correlation between my line of work and what you guys do is that I find the same situation when it comes to whether light or different types of, let's say, certain materials of either magnets or, ceramics, et cetera, where the combination or when summing the vectors to zero, for lack of a better term, in whatever context of what I'm doing is very precise. And by just even being off by a little bit, you're not going to tap that resonant, that sympathetic resonance in a particle physics sense. It seems to be absolutely identical with what your line of work is.
Yeah, very, very similar. It's really just a matter of fractality, really. Like, how many times can I reinforce this concept over and over again in the music to kind of entrain you to that? And yeah, if you get any of it off, you're doing yourself a disservice. It's going to throw the whole thing off. So people have no idea how long these things take. They think it's just like a droning thing, and I just put a little melody on it, and that's it. Like, there's so much thought and science that goes into this before we even record the very first
How
thing.
how
Yeah.
many between with respects to the creative process of when you work on developing your songs and all of that before you so eloquently and beautifully put them out? Because I actually will say to you and to the audience, I've fallen asleep to a few of them myself in the last handful of nights, and I don't plan to stop. Which I want to
Thank
thank
you.
you, by the way.
Thank
Um,
you.
no, thank you. The creative process, what's that like in terms of on average? Is it, for example, I imagine again, it's akin to perhaps developing an instrumental song with lyrics, etc., where there's maybe a discussion with your colleagues, maybe there's you're finding a rhythm, and then you kind of build from there, or is it not necessarily the case with what you guys do in terms of is it a multi-day process by the time you have a conversation, find the tune, edit it, and then publish, or what's that like?
Yeah, well, there's Mike and I generally work separately. He works on his projects. I work on my projects. We talk about them and talk about different ways we can make them better. But it's mostly it begins with a lot of research. I just kind of do look through the medical journals and just look at what I want to what I want to focus on, and what could be helpful. And
Oh wait, sorry, you
that's where
said
it
you
begins
look
for me.
sorry, you said you look
Yeah.
through the medical journals.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's incredible.
Yeah. And the studies have already been done by Harvard and all kinds of people. Yeah,
Right.
this is like this is not a secret. It's just nobody's doing
Right.
anything about it. We
It's
all
just right.
there's
It's
a
so
consensus. These frequencies are better for you.
you
It's
sound you
just
sound
no one's
like
doing
you
anything about
sound
it.
like one of you sound like me using one of my talking points for when people talk about, well, what about certain things with gravity, etc. Well, it's out there. It's just papers are published and nothing really comes of it after that. I take it it's the same thing with what you find.
Same thing. Same
Uh,
thing. Absolutely the same thing. So yeah, and then the people that there are people doing it, but then I they're not they may be interested in the subject, but they're not music producers, right? They don't have that kind of background to really know how I can put this together in a very, very, very cool way, an effective way. So I have that going for me too, and Mike as well, where we already have this deep background in music and production and making records, and now we're just throw this on.
that is, man, you really my audience is
Who's
probably
just
gonna have
learned the science, and now they have to learn music. Yeah.
right, right.
Go ahead.
My audience is no, sorry, my audience is probably going to have a little bit of a laugh because I've perked up now that you said that you use medical journals or papers to help sort of
Oh,
yeah, right. So I take
yeah,
it
yeah.
you go through, so the process of that is going through essentially what you find to be the most beneficial with respects to various types of healing, for example, and then you take it from there.
Yeah, yeah. For example, the last one I did was 174 hertz, which is a solfeggio frequency. Now, I already decided I was going to do the solfeggio tones at that point, but because there's 9 of them altogether. But the 174 hertz, I just did some research and just found that Harvard actually did 2 studies on 174 hertz for pain relief. Yes, it works. It works better than a placebo, right? It
Right,
definitely reduces the pain and reduces inflammation. Why we're not using this, I don't know. Maybe
right.
because it doesn't come in a bottle, but that's it.
Difficult to patent.
Yeah, difficult to patent, right? Yeah, how are you going to make money on it? That's another big thing. So, I just want to help people. It'd be great if we could make a decent living at this. That'd be awesome. But really, there's so much satisfaction in and just getting these comments and emails from people that they're just, I haven't slept in 6 months, or I have PTSD and now I don't have PTSD anymore. I have terrible anxiety and I haven't been out of the house in months and now I can leave. Like, I get those kind of comments every day. It's like
Wow.
incredible. Yeah. So early in my career, I would get autograph. People ask for my autograph, or say they would reminisce about some song I made, but this is so much more rewarding. It's like, dare I say, I sound like a doc. I feel like a doctor a little bit. I feel like, wow, I've really, really helped somebody, and that is so, man. There's no better feeling than that. That's the reward. If you're chasing a Lamborghini, I promise you're chasing the wrong thing. Chase helping
Right.
people. That's, man, that fills it up. I know that sounds cliche and dumb, but it's the
No,
truth.
no, it doesn't at all. I mean, I've often said quite truthfully that by helping oneself, you begin to help others directly and
Absolutely.
indirectly, right? So by
Yeah.
working on your music, you are by definition not just working on yourself, but helping others via the dissemination of it.
Absolutely. And there's real esoteric philosophy behind that too, right? Dan Winter talks about it all the
Right.
time. The chalice of the cup of the Holy Grail is the cup of the heart. You got to fill it up first and let it kind of spill over. And that spillover you just give away. You just give as much of it as you can because your cup is already full.
Right.
Mm.
Very, very well put. And then you'd be surprised how the actual container or size of the cup grows as you begin to remove some of your, if you could say, if you begin to help others in that sense. So
Yeah.
that's, it becomes more of like a Klein bottle type situation.
Yes,
Right.
exactly. Yeah.
Right. Very, very
Yeah.
well put. Another thing I wanted to ask was with respect to, for those that are not familiar, although I'm certain most are, sound baths. One thing I've written down here to keep in mind is that I had done a sound bath probably a month ago privately. Unexpectedly did a session with someone who did a very good job, in my opinion. I could feel my chakras aligning and resonating in that sense. But I wanted to ask if you've come across this or others have told you about it, etc., where there's sort of a breathing slash humming exercise during the sound bath as well, where what you find is that I've noticed, for example, this idea of I guess you could say unconscious or anxiety or stress or anything that negative that tends to be relieved through that breathing method where you start to sort of inhale and then you exhale and then you notice that as you exhale the sort of aggressive hum decreases every time. Do you find, for example, that whether it's with that specifically or in general, do you find that your work tends to help with those type of exercises?
Yes, absolutely. There's two different ways you can listen to this. You can use headphones, and that's how you're going to get the most out of the binaural beat aspect of it,
Mm,
which is not the phi balance. So the phi balance and binaural beats are two separate things. So the binaural beats, you need to use headphones, or you need to center yourself between two stereo speakers in order for that to work.
right,
Now, that part is just for the theta state and bringing you to that lucid dream state, or it's to bring you to the delta state, which is a deep, deep, deep sleep state. Now, the other way you can listen to it is to do a sound bath, like you're talking about, which is where you if you have a good sound system in your house, um, try one of the solfeggio frequencies and play it really loud and sit in between two speakers and just see if you can stand it for 10 minutes, because your body's going to be vibrating so incredibly wild. You're just going to be like, first you'll start to get in a very meditative state, and it'll just get so intense after about 10 minutes. You're just like, oh my god, I can't even hold on. It's just too much.
right.
So it'll definitely have that effect on you. And yes, as for the breathing and the humming, that is a big part of it. So all of the music, even though it has what you hear, like the chord changes in the song, right? It would go parts. But if you listen carefully, all of the songs have one single note that holds through the entire song and it never changes. So if you can isolate that one note and hum along with it, it's going to further bring you into balance, and it's going to help you relieve the anxiety, which is you dispel that stuff from your body. We hold all of our anxieties in our muscles, in our tissue. That's where we hold it. And these frequencies will just literally vibrate it right out of your body. And if you can get it to come out in a hum, that's another great way of getting that out, because you're just kind of entraining yourself more. You're hearing the frequency, you're singing the frequency, you're feeling the frequency. It's just creating more fractality of sympathetic resonance.
Right. Now this you brought up here this note that holds and is consistent throughout an experience or a song, etc. Is this one particular note in specific, or is this sort of it's speaking to the notion of a consistent sort of harmonic depending on what you're listening to?
Yeah, no, all of the songs that are centered around one specific frequency, like
Okay.
528, for example, right? So, and that will be that frequency is a note, right? And that's the
Right.
note that's held, and everything else is just accompaniment around it. It's just there to kind of like make that one note interesting so you can stand to listen to it for more than 5 minutes. Because if it's just going, boop, and you got whoa, 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 all this stuff going on, it's just, you can't listen to that. Yeah.
Right, exactly. Now, do you think that even, for example, when lying in between, actually, before I ask you that, what, in your opinion, would be considered a good sound system? And I know, forgive me, that's probably an arbitrary general question for an expert like yourself in the field. The reason I ask is because there's been a lot of debate lately about, there being certain sound systems people recommend you do versus don't order because of, for example, certain, underlying preset functions of certain pieces of Bluetooth speakers or et cetera, et cetera. Is there anything that you recommend in that regard?
Yeah, I haven't heard any of those conspiracies, but I'm very intrigued. But no, I mean, look, just get what you like, just get something
Right.
that has a good sound system. A good amp is going to help the bass come through without you having to make it too loud. So something with a good amp on it is good. It could just be a Bluetooth speaker, but if you really want to go for the sound bath experience, play it on a pretty good system. It's something decent, not just a tiny Bluetooth speaker, and definitely not from your phone. That's not going to do it. Now, if you don't have a sound system, if you don't have a stereo, go in your car, but don't drive because it's not safe to drive like that
Right.
because you're totally out of it, But your
Right.
sound and your car is probably good enough too.
Okay, got you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, with that said, when you are, for example, lying in between two speakers, are there certain frequencies that you were, for example, would you say that if you had your song playing on one speaker, you would then play the same one at the exact same time on the other speaker for a potential amplification, perhaps?
No, I mean it's
Okay.
not. It's two speakers are not required, but typically, and I guess I'm dating myself. You buy a stereo, it's got a left and a right speaker, right? And then that's what I'm talking about to get that
Oh,
left and right. The binaural beats, like I said, is separate from the phi balance. So if you want to take advantage of the binaural beats, you have to be putting yourself inside the center of the stereo image because it's doing this. It's kind of like bringing you this way, and then what happens is you've got one frequency playing in the right ear, one frequency playing in the left, and the differential is what your mind entrains to. That's binaural beats. That is separate from phi balance, which is a tuning aspect, which has more to do with the toroidal mechanics. Now the phi balance only requires one speaker to be effective. In fact, that you could play just on your phone speakers. It would still do the trick. And you'll feel it in the room. If you just let it play in the room and leave and then come back to the room, it'll literally phi balance the room. I know that sounds crazy, but it's going to be, it'll start fractally organizing the ether, if you will, in the room.
that's incredible. Do you get I guess because it's difficult to put an official definition or word on this, but do you get a feeling that there's been sort of a restabilization of a more appropriate balance in the room, say when you were to walk into it or get up from a meditative experience using these harmonics?
Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely. A lot of times if I leave, I'll put it on for my dog while I'm gone, and first of all, my dog is usually like knocking me over like Dino when I come home, but if I put that music on, he's in the bed. He doesn't even hear me come home, he's totally asleep. And you can walk in the room and it just feels like this fog of purity. I don't know how else to say it. It just has
Sure.
this, it just feels like, whoa, you kind of walk in, you go, wow, that just really, you definitely notice a difference. I
That
also use
is
it to charge the water too. That's another thing I do. I use a big jar of water. I have a couple of videos on this, and I just put headphones on the jar of water and I leave and let it play for 8 hours and charge the water. Try drinking that.
what I was going to ask you about water and
Yeah.
liquids because there's definitely a significant role with that, whether it's, for example, people dealing with Mr. Masaru Emoto with cymatics and water,
Yeah.
all of that kind of stuff. So you put your headphones around, say, a bowl of water or a glass or a
Yeah,
cup.
I've just got a big mason jar that I got at the store, and it just holds about a gallon of water, like a glass jar, and I just put literally just put it on the counter and I put headphones on both sides. So I treat it like a big head, you know. Doesn't even need to be
Nice.
stereo. It just needs to be a speaker on it. But yeah, I mean, if you believe the Fujimoto stuff, that's all like what he's talking about. And I know that he's lost some credibility over the years because it wasn't so scientific. But however, you had I forget her name,
Oh,
but you had her
Veda.
on your show. Yes, yes, she was
Yes.
fascinating, right?
Yes, yes, because
The woman who was picking up his work, the photographing the ice and the water. Yeah,
particularly because of the repeatability within the petri dishes and all that kind of stuff. Now,
yeah.
she, in fairness, she has not implemented sound. She's doing strictly intent and things like this. But it's interesting to note, as you say, the correlations between how liquid or the water itself seems to have a response to it. Now, when you are utilizing your when you put the headphones around the water or whatever liquid or any of that case, do you find that there's you find that the longer you let that resonant effect focus and direct itself towards, like the sound is put towards the water, do you find more of a, how can I say it, sympathetic, for lack of a better term, sympathetic intuitive effect when you drink the water, for example, after many hours of having it playing on a certain, body of water?
I can't say that there's any direct thing that I've noticed. It's not like you drink this magic juice and all of a sudden you're
Right,
feeling,
right, right,
like
right.
you're tripping or anything.
Well,
But
sorry, the reason I ask is because
yeah, yeah.
I'm trying to correlate
I
this.
wish.
Right, right. I'm just thinking of, for example, when people deal with what's called like a corona discharge in electricity, and they touch it and there's a response. I was just wondering if there was anything of maybe that kind when drinking the water or observing it, but it was just curious.
Yeah, I can't say I've noticed any specific effects. I just in principle, it seems like that would be a no-brainer, you know?
Right. Right. Well, I can say certainly there are effects happening on the, you could say, quantum or nano level, just not observable. It's a matter of bringing it into the observable in that sense, if you will. Um,
Yeah.
the other thing I wanted to ask about was the idea of the left versus right brain sort of hemisphere angle. Do you find that certain sounds tend to perk someone up in intellectual thought more than others, for example? I mean, of course, we know that certain resonances and harmonics will put people to sleep very rapidly in many cases. But do you ever find any sounds that, say, you're in the studio or you're doing some editing, whether with yourself or with others, and you find that, for example, uh, you were, I guess, dare I say, far more intellectually or mentally inclined to think of something far more longer for longer periods of time when a certain sound or resonance was playing compared to others?
Yeah, the longer that you listen to it, the more effective it's going to have. And the reason I can't isolate any differences in the water is because I also listen to them at night and I'm making the music all day long. So it's
Right,
hard to say what's causing what. How
right.
do I feel? I feel amazing. I was depressed most of my life. Even having success and gold records and all that, I was still the depressed, shy, awkward kid that I was. When I was younger, right? So that doesn't leave you. It doesn't matter how many gold records you hang on your wall. You're still that person, right? You have to work on yourself. So I had all kinds of problems, and this stuff is like totally changed that for me. It's totally just, of course, there's been a spiritual awakening there too, but just all of it, all encompassing, is just so
Right.
radically changed my life that I really can't even articulate it.
If I may ask, with respects to this idea with depression and all of that, do you find that when playing certain sympathetic frequencies for prolonged periods of time, it is, dare I say, just for lack of a better way to address this verbally, is it more difficult to succumb to the depression when certain frequencies or sounds are played?
Um, I couldn't speak definitively or scientifically about that, but I would say that there is a lot of things I can point to within the 440 hertz, which is the universal standard, that would pull you what I would say is out of flow state. It's pulling you
Mm,
out of that trough, right?
right,
So
right, right.
and I think that it's that lack of congruence. There's lack of coherence rather, that is what makes everything feel uncomfortable. Everything feels like there's no stability or security. If
Mm.
in that uncomfort, if you're not comfortable with that, can create anxiety and PTSD and all kinds of things. So I
Well,
think That's where
Yes.
this helps, you know?
Right. But the reason I ask is because a lot of people have said to me, for example, they've said to me privately, very privately, they go, Dave, I see, for example, I was, not necessarily feeling so great about myself until, certain resonances were played over, in fairness, over prolonged periods of time, many weeks, for example. But
Yeah.
they state that, for example, in their opinion, they describe it being far more difficult to, even if they were to someone had said to me one time, Dave, I tried to sort of bring myself back into that depressive state, and it was far more difficult to, in the sense, in a good way, as if it was they had jumped to another frequency band or density that was far lighter, that did not want to sort of go back to that chaotic state, if you will.
That's 100% correct. I mean, that's what we're talking about when we're talking about self-realization and self-awareness, right? First, you become self-aware of the truth of what's going on, or at least getting a sense of what's going on, and that's the opening of your root chakra, right? And
Mm.
then as we raise our vibration, we move into the sacral and then to the solar plexus and to the heart. And each of these chakras have their own specific frequency that we know of, right? And that's what we're aligning it to. And that's, people say it's woo stuff. It's based on Ayurvedic medicine, which
I
is
would say it's
yeah,
not, but yeah.
it's not. It's a medicine for people who don't know. It's a medicine that was practiced in the East for 5,000 years. Now, to be generous, we've been practicing Western medicine for 200 years, and that's really being generous, right?
Right,
So
right.
we've been so conditioned to question anything that is in Western medicine has got to be bunk. Well, how does something stay in practice for 5,000 years if there's nothing to it? Right? There's
Mm,
something to it, right?
right.
So that's what the chakra system is all based on. And there's different frequencies for each of the chakras, and as you awaken, you start to look at the world different. You start to attract different things. Your vibration raises, and the things that were sympathetic to you before are no longer going to be sympathetic to you, and they're going to fall away from your life. And that space is going to be filled in by somebody at that frequency that you're vibrating at. And the whole point of all this, I think that Dan would say the same thing, is it's about refinement, right?
Right,
It's
right.
about refining the mind, and the mind. It's really one thing, right? And it's just about refinement, in my opinion.
Well,
Until you can fully waken up and out.
right,
Yeah.
right. To your point, it reminds me of if we go back for a moment, the idea of using sound to shatter glass. You've now matched the sympathetic resonance of the glass. Now, if we were to take a metaphorically and metaphysically, the idea of one or water being within a glass, representative of one's life, for example, if this once the sound shatters the glass, that glass shatters, and in the process of the shattering, it may seem very chaotic, understandably so, from the perspective of the individual, perhaps starting a new point in their life, or starting a new, et cetera, et cetera. I find it quite interesting to find that what a lot of people may not realize is that, in my opinion at least, you find that once that glass shatters, you are now able to then metaphorically swim and maneuver through an even larger glass, and then even that one eventually shatters, which speaks to the idea of the growth of self.
Yeah, there's definitely that's a great, beautiful way of thinking about it, for sure. I think what's for me, the most practical way of thinking about it is just thinking about it as a tuning, rather than you're raising yourself through these chakras. What you want to do is you want to gain an ability to control that chakra. So, chakras sound, like I said, sounds kind of hokey. So we call them mind centers, because that's really what they are.
Right.
You've got more neurons and neural connectivity in your gut than you do your brain. It's the same thing as your heart. So when we say we're thinking with our gut, we're thinking with our sacral or our solar plexus. If we've fallen in love, we're thinking with our heart. If we have something important we want to say, we're thinking with our throat chakra. So that's what the chakras represent. And if you think about it, what happens is for whatever reason, these different aspects of mind become out of tune. They become off balance. And if anybody's out there who's a musician or plays guitar or whatever, if you have 6 strings on a guitar, if you have one string that's out of tune, well, it doesn't matter what you play. Everything you play is going to sound like shit, right? It's all going to sound right. So you've got to get them in tune. So as you awaken to
Sorry, even if just to ask, even if you played a resonant or sympathetic song on the wrong frequency, it'll still be out of tune.
Yeah, yeah,
Right.
absolutely. Yeah,
Right.
it has to be right. And it doesn't matter if just one string is out, the whole thing is a mess, right?
Right.
So
Right.
you've got to just get a hold of each of the chakras, get them in tune, balance them, get them right, move on to the next. And that's what you do when you tune a guitar. You start with one note, you get that to the right frequency, and then you do the second note and you match the second note to the first note. And you just keep building on that. And that's how you tune an instrument. Your body is an instrument. Your body is the most sophisticated instrument you will ever own in your life, right?
Beautifully put. If I may ask, the just to clarify for myself and perhaps others, that if we stick with that tuning example for a moment, the tuning is all based on one frequency, however, in which is sort of been preset, correct?
Yes, the tuning is
Right.
based on 440 hertz, which has been preset. Yeah, and
Right.
it's off.
Why, just curious, very quickly, why do you think 440 was chosen, say over 450 or, 430, 420, etc.?
You can get into a rabbit hole of conspiracies with that.
Okay.
I could tell you that the Nazis were involved in it. Joseph Goebbels was the head of ministry and propaganda in Austria when this decision was made. So he was
Mm,
definitely involved in it, whether it was, a conspiracy or if it was done maliciously,
right.
who knows? I can't
Right.
speak to that, but the timing is that's when it happened.
Got you.
So it's interesting to think about okay, what if they knew about this stuff back then? I mean, how deep does this go? Because I'm just beginning to see how deep this could go, and
I
it's like,
would bet to
wow.
wager that a handful of them did.
Yeah, I kind of think so too. I
Yeah.
kind of think so too.
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
I absolutely agree. Well, Ford, I want to thank you so
yeah,
very much for coming on. But before we
yeah,
let you go, could you please let everyone know, my audience, this will be up for my members, of course, before it goes public. But could you please
yeah.
let everyone know where and how you could be found, and anything else that you would like to plug as well? And please, I say this to my audience with truthful sincerity and honesty when I say here that what Ford and team are doing at Phi Tribe is absolutely phenomenal, and I think is going to be very vital. As a matter of fact, to put the icing on the cake, I had said when I was at Brandon's house a month or two ago, as of the time we're recording this, I said to you guys off the record, I said, I am of a very strong opinion that gravity waves would behave to your music sympathetically if played in the laboratory when gravitational waves were generated. So, again, if there's anything that you'd like to promote, now's the time to do it.
Yeah, thank you. Well, you can find us at Phi Tribe on YouTube. It's PHI TRIBE. It's a mathematical thing, and we have an off YouTube thing. It's called PhiTribe369.com. And we have all kinds of extra special things on the website for there. But you can find us on YouTube. And the songs, the sleep songs don't have commercials in them, so you can listen to them without any kind of fear of being woken up or anything like that. Occasionally, YouTube messes up, but that's not on me. And just try it out. I mean, just try it for one night and see what the difference is. It'll blow your mind. And if you want to connect with me personally, I've written 2 books on existential philosophy and awakening and self-realization. So my personal channel is Ford's Playground on YouTube. So you got those 2 places. And then Mix Mike is also another producer here, and his channel is Mix Mike at YouTube.
Well,
So we all do our thing. It's all related to
I
this.
want to thank you so much, and I want to thank you as well for having me on your guys' live stream about a month and a half ago. And I just want to say as well that the live streams that you guys do for those that are watching and or listening are also very relaxing as well. They do, in my opinion, it's a perfect amount of time. They don't take too short or nor too long for the stream to go in which for the duration of it. But the conversations that are had on there and the people that jump in during the live chat are absolutely beautiful people. So again, Ford, I just want to thank you so very kindly for coming on. And to everyone else, we will catch all of you very, very soon.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you. Thank you.